And the ability of our small businesses ultimately to compete and to succeed in this economy is already very challenging. We know that. But the federal government's, I think, reckless spending in some of these areas is making it even more challenging or more difficult for the long term, particularly in terms of the value of the dollar. Inflation that may come back in a hurry if some of this debt is actually not sold, because that'll be the way to pay for the high deficits that we have, is through inflation. And that will be a real tax hit through inflation, not only on seniors or those on fixed incomes, but on the small business community that has to rely on a lot of inputs to sustain some of the productivity they've had. And as many of you know, or I hope you know, I've been a strong proponent or focus. One of my passions is small business and helping entrepreneurs. And I firmly believe that small business is the engine of economic growth for the economy. I mean, it truly is. It really is. And if we're going to have an economic recovery, a real economic recovery, small business needs to help lead the way. And we've seen that in every other past economic recession we've had in the past. Small businesses help lead the way out of those recessions. 7 of 8 of every 10 jobs comes from small business. I worked for Target Corporation, and as some of the larger companies, of course, that we all know about, or Target or Best Buy, as they go through some layoffs and challenging times, they usually lay people off, and some of those people go back to school, they get re-educated to do something different, or a good number of them usually try to start something on their own and try something new, and that means they need access to credit. It means they want to be able to start something in the garage to become the next Medtronic or become the next Best Buy. And we're not seeing that same type of economic activity that has led us out of other past recessions. And I've been pushing my colleagues as much as possible, and even the President, I might add, to focus on small business now. And I've been doing that for well over a year, having been there for just 1 year. I really think that needs to be the focus. And in fact, I've had multiple small business roundtable discussions. In fact, just over a year ago, Twin West was one of the first participants where I had a roundtable discussion, and many of those issues that I heard then for concerns about from the small business community are the same we're hearing from now. And that even goes into healthcare, actually. And frankly, Washington, I think, has been way too slow in focusing on that key element of small business job creation. And they've been very preoccupied with too big to fail and kind of propping up the big guys, or having an opportunity to make sure there's a taxpayer backing to make sure that there's some large companies that may be viewed as being systemically risky, that those industries are going to get some backing by the federal government, but small business has not been able to do the same thing. And I'm kind of taking the opposite approach. In fact, when I had a chance to speak to the President personally about this at the end of January, I mentioned a few ideas that I'm pushing or advocating to help small businesses. And these are not the traditional Republican, cut taxes just to cut taxes. I've been trying to do some things that are a little bit outside of the box and a little bit different in terms of giving a real stimulus for job creation. And I'll give you two of the proposals that I've been talking to, and I've get good feedback from the small businesses I've been talking to about them. Number one, give small businesses, because most small businesses, or a good number of you, pay your income taxes under the individual rates. So the first proposal would be this: give small businesses the ability to basically defer or not pay taxes on any money that is reinvested back into the company. So if you're going to hire a person, half a person, or you're going to reinvest in some new equipment, you're not going to pay the individual income tax on that portion of your investment. You're not going to pay tax on that. So that is a real stimulus to encourage development and innovation in small business job growth. That, I think, would be really important. So not just a straight tax cut, but it's very targeted. The other bill I'm working on is actually trying to come up with a way, and I'm working with Senator Enzi from Wyoming on this, to actually reclassify the income streams between individual income and the business income that many folks have to pay. If you're a S corporation, for instance, and you're paying under that higher rate, and it's essentially meaning an alternative rate schedule. So separating the business and individual income streams in some way so that they're tracked differently, and you're not going to pay the higher tax rate on the portion that you're using for small business income. But the bottom line is, truthfully, the biggest challenge, long-term challenge, that I think is going to be facing the business community at a larger level are just the looming tax increases that will be coming forward at the end of this year. Because there are many tax cuts that are set to expire. That's part of the existing budget that was put forward last year and again this year offered by the President, where those are going to expire. So the marginal rates across the board are essentially going to rise. Capital gains tax increases will rise. That means it's going to be a higher tax on savings, on investment, and on work. And I still will maintain that the best thing you can do to help develop some certainty out there for the business community, certainty for investors, is to have lower marginal tax rates that you know are going to be permanent. And when they're not permanent, you got a lot of investors sitting on their hands, and they're not sure what to expect. And that uncertainty in the areas of healthcare, the area of energy legislation, in terms of what the cost impacts may be in the business community, is very real. And that uncertainty is causing folks to hold back. Rather than wondering, have we reached the bottom and we're bumping along right now in terms of our economic recovery, our businesses are not hiring people back, even though they think they might be picking up a little bit. They're maybe adding a few hours to the existing employees they have and giving them a little bit of overtime. What we need to do is make sure people are actually getting hired back to broaden the spectrum of more job growth. And with that level of uncertainty, we're not seeing the focus, ultimately where I think the focus needs to be. There's even talk right now of adding a value-added tax, much like Europe has had. I mean, one of the president's key advisors floated that idea. It was either earlier this week or last week that that very well could be a possibility for a VAT tax, value-added tax at the business level, or a national sales tax. I think there's going to be more increasing discussion about that because, you know, as the legislators talked about the mandates that are a part of the health care bill that get pushed on down to the states. I mean, Washington can only, for so long, provide additional resources to the states to meet their challenging budget needs as well. And eventually they're going to have more revenue to cover the losses, if you will. And there's going to be, I think, more discussion at the end of this year about that value-added tax concept coming forward. And I'm concerned about that. And I think the best thing we can do, again, for the small business community, the business community at large, is to provide a level of certainty so that workers and investors and employers can know what to expect and then work, save, and invest accordingly. I do want to mention, though, that, of course, I think one of the keys to your success and your competitiveness is not just taxes and regulations, but it's also economic competitiveness. And I saw this when I went out to cast screw, for instance. And, these are not just companies that are just doing traditional manufacturing sometimes, but, you're not competing against Iowa and North Dakota and South Dakota, much like it was even only 15 years ago. This is competing against the rest of the world. I mean, it is India and China and a lot of places that have significant populations of younger people that are growing up right now that want to beat the United States at every step of the way, and they are fired up to do so. And we have a tremendous global challenge right now, I think, from those countries in particular. And we can't just put a wall up around our country and say we're not going to pay any attention to what's happening in areas like Southeast Asia, which is probably going to be the center of economic gravity for some period of time, because the demographics are going to continue. We don't change demographics. Demographics are going to continue to change to the standpoint of we've got more honor students in China than we have students here in the United States. And so these are younger people, they're smart, they're working hard, they want to develop their country to beat the United States every day, and that's where our competition is. And if we have manufacturers here, particularly in med tech and other areas where you have a value-added component, that's where we can win. But that's only going to go so far if we're not making sure we've got the educated workforce. And I know that the Chamber is very active and involved in that. And, there's environmental controls and things like that, of course, that are very different vis-a-vis what the United States might do versus China and India, and those are factors too. But by and large, it's going to be the demographic population shifts that are going to provide the biggest challenge, I think, to areas like countries like the United States. In fact, even China is losing manufacturing jobs right now, as they're kind of developing their sector or their economy in a different way, where they're outsourcing many of their manufacturing opportunities to other countries as well. So the bottom line is for you, and whether it's Cast Screw or other companies, it's being the smartest and the best trained and the most productive workforce, and that's how we can keep our edge. That's how we have to keep our edge. And then ultimately it means being more innovative and having forward-thinking leadership in Washington and being solution-oriented on many of the problems that exist. And I'll just touch real quick on healthcare.